Your sister tried to kill you as a child, and your family laughed it off. Now she's demanding you lose weight before her wedding and sent you a diet book as a hint. Hey everyone, welcome back. If this is your first time here, this is the channel where we break down real stories from real people. No sugarcoating, no filter, just the truth, no matter how uncomfortable it gets. Subscribe because it only gets more intense from here. Now let's get into it. We'll call our girl Leah. She's almost 19. The second youngest of five kids in a big Canadian family, two older brothers, one older sister, we'll call her X, and the youngest, who's only four. 5 years separate Leah and X. And those 5 years always felt like 50. Growing up, Leah was basically an inconvenience to her sister. When it was Leah's turn to pick the family movie, X sulked. When Leia got something nice, X found a reason to complain. Small things? Maybe. But small things that added up to one clear pattern. This girl needed to control everything and everyone around her. Then X met her boyfriend. We'll call him Ian. Works in IT, makes over $120,000 a year. She's an accountant pulling in $100,000. A financially independent couple who could easily pay for any wedding they wanted. Keep that detail in mind. We're coming back to it. Ian proposed at a family beach day in June. Big white letters made from rose petals, ocean breeze, happy tears. Their parents were thrilled. The brothers were happy. The 4-year-old was probably just running around in the sand. And Leia smiled and tried her best to genuinely share in the joy. But by the next day, things started shifting. Mom insisted that X include Leia as a bridesmaid. X agreed, but on her own terms, because X always does everything on her own terms. And soon enough, Leia received the list. I read through this list a few times, and every single time I had one question. Is this actually real? Every bridesmaid is required to personally pay for a blush pink dress at $300 plus shoes, hair, and makeup. Okay, that happens. But then it gets a whole lot worse. Mandatory attendance at every bachelorette event, a spa day at $800 per person, a trip to Toronto with a stay at the Fairmont Hotel for $1,000 for 2 nights, plus a cake and food tasting for another $25. All out of pocket. Because apparently it's an honor to stand next to the bride. Every single wedding guest is required to pay a $150 deposit to hold their seat. No deposit, no seat. Gifts must come exclusively from the bride's registry, where she has already assigned specific gifts to specific people. Bring something not on the list. She'll return it. No discussion. But wait, there's more. Bridesmaids must visit a salon every 6 weeks, at their own expense, to keep their skin and hair flawless for photos. Tattoos must be covered. The dresses are specifically designed to cover the neck, wrists, and ankles, because X wants to be the only one showing bare arms and bald hair. If your hair is colored, dye it back to natural or buy a wig. Again, your expense. And then there was the one point that made Leah go completely silent. The dresses only go up to a size 10. If you don't fit, lose the weight. Leah wears a size 12. Her sister had already mailed her a book about the keto diet with a very pointed message attached. Leah stared at that list and thought, maybe this is just pre wedding stress? That's what mom kept saying. But Leah knew her sister far better than she wished she did. Because when Leah was born, her mom went through severe postpartum depression and ended up in a psychiatric facility for 4 months. Dad was left alone with five kids. The boys were a handful, the baby had a nanny, and X, a 5-year-old girl, was caught in the middle. No mom, no real attention, at the worst possible age for it. And when mom came back, X didn't forgive. Not her mom. Her mom she forgave, instantly. But Leia? Never. Because Leia was the reason mom left. This baby ruined everything. One day, 5-year-old X walked into the room and pressed a pillow down onto the baby's face. Mom got there just in time. And then that story became a family joke. Just a funny little anecdote over dinner. Leia grew up genuinely believing it was a childish mistake, that her sister didn't know what she was doing. that they had moved past it. But now, holding a diet book in one hand and a two-page list of demands in the other, Leah suddenly understood something she had been too close to see before. Her sister never forgave her. She had resented her quietly, methodically, deliberately, her entire life. And this wedding was just the latest battlefield. Only this time, Leah decided she wasn't going to lose. So, Leah decided to act. But first, she did what most people do when they don't know where else to turn. She called her aunt, who also happened to be her godmother, someone who had watched everything from the sidelines for years and stayed quiet far longer than she should have. Leah called her from work, quietly, between shifts, so nobody could hear, and laid everything out: the list, the demands, the diet book, the $150 entry fee to a family wedding. Her aunt listened, then said it plainly: "Your mom is acting crazy for allowing any of this. Not, well, she's your sister. You have to be patient. Not, she's probably just nervous before the big day. Just clearly and directly. This is not normal, and you have every right to protect yourself." For the first time in a long time, Leah felt like someone was actually seeing the situation for what it was. Her aunt told her to talk to her parents, not just about the wedding, about everything, about the years of X getting whatever she wanted while Leah learned not to ask for too much, about the imbalance that had quietly settled into this family that everyone noticed but nobody ever named out loud. Leah promised she'd try, but before that conversation could happen, another detail surfaced. And this one was the kind that makes your stomach drop. Remember how X and Ian together earn over $220,000 a year? So why exactly were Leah's parents footing a $100,000 wedding bill? Where did that number even come from? Turns out it started right after the engagement. X had a private conversation with her mom, and she said exactly what she knew would work. "Mom, I've always felt like the unloved child." 5 words. And mom completely fell apart because mom remembered those 4 months in the facility. She remembered coming home and finding a 5-year-old girl who had learned to exist without her. The guilt she had carried quietly for years suddenly came flooding back with full force, and mom made a decision. She decided to redirect money from the kids' savings accounts to pay for X's wedding. Let's pause here for a second, because this part matters. Leah's parents had been putting aside $25,000 for each of their 5 children over the years. 5 kids, 5 accounts. The money belonged to the kids and was set to transfer to them at age 19. The two older brothers were in the military. The Canadian Army covered their education, housing, everything, so their $25,000 each had just been sitting there untouched. Together, that was $50,000. Add X's own $25,000, add Leah's $25,000. Total, exactly $100,000. The exact cost of the dream wedding. Mom figured that since Leah was about to spend $177,000 on university anyway, the $25,000 could just be returned to her later. The important thing right now was to give the neglected child everything she ever wanted. But Dad knew absolutely none of this. He thought he was responsible for covering the bride's dress and a small portion of the wedding costs, not $100,000, not his children's savings accounts. And that's exactly why, when Leah finally gathered the courage to sit down with her parents, everything exploded with a force that this family could no longer pretend away. Leah told them everything: how she felt, what kind of financial damage this was doing to her, how unfair it was to take her money without even asking. She pulled up screenshots from the group chat where mom had repeatedly written, "Your father and I decided," about things dad had never agreed to at all. Dad looked at those messages, said nothing, for a long time. Then he exploded. Not at Leah. He asked her to step out of the room, and spoke to mom alone. What happened behind that closed door, Leah couldn't hear. But when the door opened again, mom's face looked different. Not broken, just different. Mom came to Leah's room, and for the first time in as long as Leah could remember, she was completely honest. She talked about those 4 months Leah had no memory of, because she had been a newborn, about how hard it was to come back home, about the guilt that never fully went away, about how X had learned to use that guilt, first without really understanding what she was doing, and then very much on purpose. Leah listened, and for the first time she saw her mom not as someone who always took X's side, but as someone who had been trapped in a cage built from her own pain and someone else's manipulation. They made peace. Not perfectly, not instantly, but it was the first real step. Meanwhile, Dad called X, told her to come home immediately. Not tomorrow, not in a few days. Now. X said she was with her fiance and his family and would be there in 4 hours. Dad said, come now. She hung up and blocked his number. Dad sat down and waited. X showed up 5 hours later. And while Ian's mother was still in the house, she was sweet, calm, almost gentle, smiling, speaking softly, being exactly who she knew how to be when she needed something from someone. But the moment Ian's mother's car turned the corner, everything shifted. Instantly, Leia said it later. It was like a switch, just click, and a completely different person walked into the room. X demanded to know why Dad had ruined their evening, why he had spoken to her that way, why he was making this into something it didn't need to be. Dad said calmly, sit down. She refused. They argued, loudly, for a long time. And eventually X sat down, but only after Dad quietly mentioned that he could share some very interesting information about his daughter's true character with Ian's mother, things that Ian himself apparently hadn't seen yet. Leah was asked to leave the room again. Behind the closed door, she could hear shouting, crying, threats. X promised to cut contact with the family, threatened to make sure her parents never saw their future grandchildren, demanded mom go back to the original $100,000 plan. Mom and dad didn't give in. And then dad said something that made X go completely quiet. He said, your mother is not your punching bag. She is not responsible for getting sick. If you're still this angry about those 4 months, go to therapy. Because we are done letting you take it out on this family. Silence. Then Leah was called back into the room. And they talked about everything, including the diet book. X tried to defend herself. I mean, she could stand to lose a little weight. Dad looked at her in a way that ended that topic permanently. Eventually, X called a cab. On her way out, she threw one last line over her shoulder. You're all attacking me. The door closed. The family sat in silence, exhausted, but for the first time in a very long time, honest with each other. And then Dad turned to Leah and said the words she had needed to hear for years. You will get your $25,000 back, every single cent. And you are not obligated to go to that wedding if you don't want to. You'd think that was it. The conflict was out in the open. The parents finally saw the truth. The money was being returned. Time to breathe. But if you think that's where this story ends, you don't know X yet. Because X doesn't quit. Ever. That's not who she is. The weeks that followed were tense and quiet. X didn't call, didn't text, just disappeared. And that silence was almost louder than all the screaming that came before it. Meanwhile, the parents sat down together and rebuilt the wedding budget from scratch. No manipulation, no hidden agreements. They brought Ian's family into the conversation. And that's when another detail came out that made everyone's jaw drop. Remember the $150 deposit per guest? X had been explaining it as an Italian tradition, something that was simply done in Ian's family. But when Ian's mother found out about it, she was completely stunned. No such tradition exists. There's a money dance at the reception, sure, but a mandatory entry fee charged to wedding guests? X made that up entirely. Just invented it on the spot and covered it with someone else's culture. Ian's mother sat with that information for a long moment, then said what everyone was already thinking. $100,000 for a wedding is insane, and his family was not going to participate at that level. Here's what they finally agreed on. X would get $15,000 from her parents, and that was including the $10,000 already spent on deposits and bookings, which meant she realistically had $5,000 left to work with. Ian's family added their contribution $10,000 toward the wedding and $5,000 for the honeymoon. Together, nowhere close to the $100,000 dream. Leah got her $25,000 back, in full. Dad personally walked her into the bank, canceled the loan she had been forced to take out, and paid the early cancellation fee himself, because he acknowledged that Leah never should have needed that loan in the first place. The first year of university would be covered separately, without touching her savings at all. That was justice. Late, but real. And then, something happened that Leia didn't see coming. The family decided to get together at Christmas, when the brothers would be back from their postings, and have one honest conversation about what everyone needed to move forward. No blame, no screaming. Instead, she did something else entirely. She called Leah directly and said it clearly. You destroyed my relationship with my fiance and his family. You caused damage that cannot be undone, and because of that, you are not invited to my wedding. Not as a bridesmaid, not as a guest. You are not welcome, and as far as I'm concerned, you are no longer part of my life. Leah listened to every word, then hung up, and felt nothing. Not pain, not anger, not even relief exactly. Just quiet, clean, and still. She wrote about it later. I don't feel like I lost a sister. I feel like I finally got rid of someone who wished me harm my entire life. 3 months passed. The family started therapy together. The brothers got leave and came back from overseas, and for the first time in years, the whole family sat in the same room and spoke honestly. Not perfectly, not without tears, but honestly. Leah and her mom became closer than they had ever been. Leah described it like this: It feels like I finally have a best friend, the one I never really had growing up. And then something happened that Leah called the best thing to come out of this entire mess. Her older brother announced he was getting married, and his fiancée, quiet, warm, thoughtful, the kind of person who texts Leia every few days just to check in and orders her food delivery when she's having a rough day, even from another city, called Leah one afternoon and asked, Leah, would you feel comfortable being one of my bridesmaids? I completely understand if it's too much right now. There's no pressure at all, and I won't be offended either way. She just asked. No list, no requirements, no conditions attached. Leah said yes without hesitating for a single second. I lost one sister and gained a real one. And what about X? The wedding happened. Leah's family wasn't invited, but cousins, friends, and members of Ian's family filled them in on how the day went. Ian's mother showed up in an ivory dress. Several guests brought their children despite the strict no children rule. At least one bridesmaid was late. The legendary list of demands apparently nobody followed through to the end. But the real moment happened at the reception. Ian's mother, the same woman who had been genuinely shocked by the invented $150 deposit tradition, had quietly invited one of Ian's ex girlfriends to the reception, apparently hoping it might shake something loose between the couple. The ex did approach. She actually stepped between X and Ian during the reception. Ian asked her to leave, calmly, without a scene, and in that moment, Leia said she felt something unexpected, something almost like sympathy for her sister, because even on the most important day of her life, X couldn't simply be happy. There had to be chaos somewhere nearby. There always did. At the end of the reception, Ian stood up to give his speech. A slideshow played behind him, and the final slide showed an ultrasound image with the words, Baby, June 2023. X was pregnant. Leia found out the next morning from her cousins. She sat with her phone in her hands and thought about the fact that soon there would be a child. A small person coming into the world who would know nothing about lists, manipulation, or old wounds carried across decades. And Leia genuinely hopes that for that child, things will be different. But making that happen is no longer her responsibility. You know what's the most striking thing about this entire story? Not the list of demands, not the $150 entry fee to a family wedding. Not even the diet book mailed to a younger sister instead of a congratulations card. The most striking thing is that all of it went on for years, and everyone just pretended it was normal. Mom carried her guilt in silence and let herself be manipulated because of it. Dad simply didn't have the full picture. The brothers were far away, and Leah grew up in a family where an attempted murder got turned into a dinner table joke and genuinely believed that was just how things were, that she was probably just too sensitive, that this was normal family stuff. That's what years of silence do to people. They convince you that what is deeply wrong is somehow perfectly fine. But here's what this story proves beyond any doubt: the truth always comes out. Always. Maybe not today. Maybe not this year. But it always does. Sometimes it takes one honest phone call to an aunt. Sometimes it takes one screenshot from a group chat shown to the right person at the right time. Sometimes it just takes a single moment where you're sitting quietly and thinking, wait, is any of this actually okay? Leah did something that most people in her situation never find the courage to do. She didn't stay quiet, not for the sake of keeping the peace, not because she's family, she simply told the truth and let the truth do what it does. And here's the thing: her life after that wasn't suddenly perfect. Her relationship with her mom is still being rebuilt day by day. Her sister still resents her and probably will for a long time. Ian's family is still spreading stories about them, but Leah feels like herself for the first time in years. Free, not a punching bag for someone else's unresolved pain. She made her parents one promise: that she would never treat her little sister the way X treated her, that she would be the example for her that she herself never had, that she would be her protector, simply and without drama, no lists, no conditions, no entry fee required, and in that, maybe, is the most quietly beautiful ending to a very ugly story. If this story made you feel something, anger, relief, recognition, drop it in the comments below. Because stories like this don't only exist on the internet, they exist in real families, maybe even in yours. If you've been through something similar, share it. This is a safe space. Hit the like button if you watched all the way through. It genuinely helps this channel more than you know. Subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. And share this video with someone who might need to hear it right now. See you in the next one.